Ancient civilizations built roads and ramps that should have been impossible. This is not about the famous Roman highways you know. We are exploring a hidden world of forgotten infrastructure, where the scale of the work defies every logical explanation. By the end, you will see the ancient world not as a simpler time, but as an age of staggering ambition that still leaves experts speechless. How did cultures without modern machinery carve highways across sheer mountain cliffs? What compelled them to move mountains of earth just to build a single ramp? These ancient pathways force us to question everything we think we know about engineering and human will. Which forgotten road do you believe holds the greatest secret? The true puzzle is not that they built these structures, but why they built them this way. An ordinary ancient road serves a clear purpose. It connects 2 points, allows for trade, moves armies from point A to point B. The roads and ramps that capture our imagination, however, seem to operate by a different set of rules entirely. They possess a combination of traits that push them beyond mere infrastructure and into the realm of the inexplicable. First, there is the sheer, overwhelming scale. We are not talking about a well-trodden path through a valley. We are talking about highways carved directly into the face of a vertical cliff, stretching for dozens of miles. We are talking about ramps built from millions of tons of rubble and earth, constructions so massive they alter the landscape permanently. The physical size of the project is the first clue that something extraordinary is happening. Then we must consider the environment. These are not gentle paths through forgiving terrain. They are built across some of the most hostile landscapes on Earth. Barren deserts where water and shelter were non-existent. Dense, mountainous jungles where every inch of progress meant battling the forest itself. Icy mountain passes where the air is thin and the cold is deadly. The builders chose, or perhaps were compelled to choose, the hardest possible route. This leads to the third point, the logistical nightmare. Imagine the workforce required. Not just skilled engineers, but thousands of laborers, all needing food, water, and shelter in places that could not naturally provide it. The organization needed to sustain such an effort for years, even decades, is staggering to contemplate. Finally, and perhaps most intriguingly, is the question of apparent necessity. Many of these constructions display a level of over-engineering that seems to defy practical reason. A simple, functional ramp would have sufficed to move stones. Yet, some ancient cultures built ramps wide enough for 10 chariots to ride abreast, or paved roads with intricate stonework in locations where only foot traffic would ever pass. This monumental quality, this desire to build not just for function but for something grander, is the common thread. It is this fusion of immense scale, brutal environment, staggering logistics, and seemingly superfluous grandeur that defines our enigma. These are not just roads, they are statements carved into the earth itself, and to understand those statements, we must walk their lengths. To appreciate the outliers, we first need to understand the standard toolkit. Ancient engineers were masters of physics, employing principles we still use today, just powered by human ingenuity instead of engines. The lever was a fundamental tool, allowing a small team to pivot massive stones. Rollers, often simple logs placed beneath a slab, turned impossible drags into manageable rolls. For elevation, the inclined ramp was the universal solution, a sloping pathway of packed earth or rubble that transformed a vertical lift into a gradual, sustained pull. Simple pulley systems, though less common in some early cultures, provided mechanical advantage for hoisting. Water was also a brilliant ally, with canals and flooded trenches allowing barges to carry colossal loads that would crumble any road. These methods represent the brilliant, practical baseline of ancient engineering. They are the proven formulas, the reliable techniques that built pyramids, temples, and city walls across the globe. The workforce for such projects, while immense, operated on a scale that historians can reasonably model using records of population, agriculture, and social organization. We can trace the quarries, calculate the volume of stone, and estimate the time. This established baseline makes the anomalies that much more jarring. Because when we encounter a road carved along a cloud-shrouded cliff for 50 miles, or a ramp of fitted stone ascending a mountain with no apparent destination, we are not just looking at a larger application of known techniques. We are looking at something that seems to disregard the economic and logistical logic of its time. The labor coordination shifts from thousands to potentially tens of thousands sustained in impossible places. The material transport involves moving not just stone, but entire mountains of specific soils across vast, roadless distances. The precision is applied not to a sacred temple facade, but to the very ground beneath their feet in the middle of a wilderness. These projects feel less like constructions and more like declarations. They exist in a category of their own, pushing beyond the baseline into a realm where the why becomes as compelling a mystery as the how. This brings us to a network that redefines the very idea of a road. High in the Andes Mountains, a civilization achieved the impossible with nothing but stone, rope, and human will. The Inca Empire did not just build roads, they wove an entire continent together with threads of stone. Their network, the Qhapaq, was an engineering masterpiece of a scale that is almost incomprehensible. Stretching for over 40,000 kilometers, it was the spine of the largest empire in the pre-Columbian Americas, connecting modern-day Colombia all the way down to Chile. But the distance alone is not what baffles historians, it is the terrain it conquered. This was not a single path, but a vast, integrated system of highways that crossed the most extreme landscapes on the planet. It climbed from barren coastal deserts up through some of the world's highest mountain passes and down into dense cloud forest jungles. To traverse such diversity, the Inca engineers became problem solvers on a grand scale. Where they met a vertical cliff face they did not go around, they carved stairways directly into the living rock, creating a sense that seemed to defy gravity. When they encountered a raging river in a deep gorge, they built suspension bridges from woven grass, cables as thick as a person's body, which were strong enough to support columns of soldiers and llamas, yet were rebuilt by communities every few years in a sacred ritual. If a mountain stood in the way of a perfectly straight route, they tunneled through it. The logistical triumph here is almost beyond belief. Consider what they lacked: the wheel, iron tools, and any form of draft animal for heavy hauling. Every stone was shaped with harder stones, every ounce of material was carried on human backs. Yet they achieved a level of integration that rivals modern highway systems. Relay runners could carry a message from one end of the empire to the other in a matter of days, thanks to a network of way stations spaced a day's walk apart. How did they survey such a vast and tortuous landscape? How did they plan routes that often followed near-perfect straight lines across impossible geography? And perhaps most mysteriously, how did they coordinate the maintenance of thousands of kilometers of roadway across peaks and valleys, ensuring a messenger or a troop could always move with imperial speed? The Qhapaq stands as a testament not to what technology can do, but to what human organization and vision can achieve when pushed to its absolute limit. It was more than a road, it was the physical manifestation of an empire's will, a stone ribbon holding a mountain realm together. Yet the Inca roads, for all their grandeur, connected places of tangible importance: cities, storehouses, temples. What happens when we find pathways that seem to lead nowhere at all? In the stark, wind-swept silence of southern Peru's Nazca Desert lies a different kind of ancient mark upon the earth. Here, the canvas is a vast, stony plateau, And the artists worked not by adding material but by subtraction. For over 2,000 years, the Nazca lines have guarded their secret, an encyclopedia of giant shapes etched into the desert floor. While the famous hummingbirds and spiders capture the imagination, it is the lesser-known geometric forms that present a more profound engineering mystery. Stretching across the arid plain are hundreds of perfectly straight lines, some running unerringly for over 50 kilometers. Alongside them are immense trapezoids and rectangles, so large their shapes can only be fully comprehended from the air. This is not road building in any conventional sense, but the creation of pathways on a scale meant for a viewer we cannot see. The puzzle of their purpose is legendary. Were they astronomical calendars, sacred pathways for ritual processions, or messages intended for celestial beings? While that debate continues, the sheer act of their creation is a logistical marvel that stands alone. Imagine the task teams of people, centuries before the Inca, working on a flat but rugged plain. Their tools were simple, likely wooden stakes and ropes. Their method was to remove the top layer of dark, sun-baked pebbles to reveal the lighter-colored sand beneath, creating a stark contrast. But the precision is what defies logic. These lines do not waver. Over distances that would vanish over the horizon for the people making them, they maintain arrow-straight trajectories. How did the Nazca achieve this? Without an aerial perspective, how did they ensure a line starting at one mountain slope would meet its intended endpoint kilometers away with perfect alignment? The coordination suggests a sophisticated understanding of surveying, perhaps using a series of aligned markers or sighting poles, but the flawless execution on such a colossal scale remains deeply impressive. Then there is the volume of work, moving millions of tons of surface rock by hand to create figures and lines covering hundreds of square kilometers. This was not a single generation's project, but a sustained cultural effort maintained across centuries. The lines were kept clean, the pathways preserved, implying a significance that was central to their worldview. Whether these geoglyphs were walked upon by priests in solemn ceremony or were meant only to be seen from above, they represent a different facet of our theme, a monument not of connection but of communication. They transformed an entire desert into a sacred diagram, a testament to a people who moved mountains of stone not to reach a place but perhaps to touch the heavens. But a straight line across a desert, while a feat of surveying, operates on a flat plain. Gravity is not the primary enemy. To find a construction that seems to defy the very physics of mass and movement, we must travel to the Bekaa Valley of Lebanon. Here, at the ancient site of Baalbek, the mystery is not in the distance covered, but in the weight lifted. The Romans built a magnificent temple complex atop a much older foundation, and within that foundation lies a puzzle that has silenced generations of engineers. It is known as the Trilithon, a wall composed of 3 perfectly fitted limestone blocks. Their size is not just impressive, it is almost violent in its scale. Each stone is estimated to weigh over 800 tons. To put that into a human perspective, that is the equivalent of 2 fully loaded jumbo jets, or a small apartment building carved from a single piece of rock. These monoliths were quarried from a site over half a mile away, then hauled up a gentle but significant incline and placed with precision nearly 20 feet above the ground. The how of this operation is a vortex of speculation, but the most accepted theory involves a construction ramp, and this is where the logic of the project collapses into awe. Building a ramp sturdy enough to support and move an 800-ton block is not a simple matter of piling up dirt. The incline must be shallow, perhaps no more than a few degrees to make the pull possible. To move a stone that heavy half a mile and up an incline of even 5 degrees, the ramp would have to be a colossal earthwork in itself, potentially containing more material than some of the smaller Egyptian pyramids. Imagine the labor, not just to move the 3 destination stones, but to first move a mountain of soil and rubble just to create the pathway to move them. The quarry operation alone is mind-bending, with one even larger block, known as the Stone of the Pregnant Woman, left partially attached to the bedrock, weighing an estimated 1,200 tons. Why choose such a method? Why not use smaller, more manageable stones, as every other culture in history learned to do? The Romans were master engineers with access to cranes, pulleys, and advanced leverage techniques. Yet here, they or the builders before them appear to have chosen the most brute force, most logistically overwhelming solution imaginable. It suggests a purpose beyond mere construction. This was not just about building a strong foundation. It was about making a statement of power so absolute, so undeniable, that it was literally set in stone, a demonstration that the builders could move mountains because, for all intents and purposes, that is exactly what they did. The ramp, if it existed, was a temporary mountain built to conquer the impossible, and its ghost still haunts the valley. The ambition of Baalbek's builders finds a haunting echo in the vast, empty expanse of the Pacific Ocean. On one of the world's most isolated islands, a society performed an engineering ritual that seems to defy its own survival. Easter Island, or Rapa Nui, is synonymous with the Moai, those brooding stone giants gazing inland. Yet the statues themselves are only half the mystery. The other half lies in the ground beneath them, a network of ancient roads that tell a story of staggering effort and profound purpose. These were not simple tracks, but prepared ceremonial pathways, meticulously cleared and often lined with parallel curbstones, descending from the volcanic quarry of Rono Roroku and radiating outward toward the island's coastal platforms. Along these roads, the islanders transported nearly 900 multi-ton statues, some standing over 30 feet tall and weighing more than 80 tons. The distances were not immense, often just a few kilometers, but the terrain was punishing, a rugged landscape of volcanic rock and soft, unstable soil. For centuries, the question of how they moved these giants has been the central puzzle. The romantic, popular theory suggests the statues were walked upright, rocked from side to side by teams pulling on ropes, a method that some small-scale experiments have shown is mechanically possible. But recent archaeological work has complicated that elegant image. The discovery of the prepared roads reveals a far more organized infrastructural approach. These were permanent, engineered features of the landscape, implying that statue transport was not a sporadic event but a sustained, core societal activity. The scale of the operation is what truly baffles. Imagine the societal focus required. A substantial portion of the island's population and resources, for generations, was dedicated to a single, continuous process, carving giants from the mountain and then moving them, one by one, along sacred avenues to their final resting places. Did they slide them on lubricated wooden sledges, roll them on a track of logs, or perhaps a combination of methods, using the prepared roadbed as a stable foundation for a complex rocking maneuver? Each theory presents its own logistical nightmare, requiring vast amounts of timber, rope, and perfectly coordinated labor on an island with limited resources. This is the heart of the Rapa Nui enigma. The roads are not just a means to an end, they are a physical record of a civilization's priorities, a map of its spiritual ambition. The effort poured into this network of paths, and the statues that walked them, speaks of a belief system so powerful it could command the movement of mountains. In the end, the silent Moai and the roads that cradled their journey stand together, a monument to a people who shaped their entire world and perhaps their destiny around the act of bringing stone to life. The silent giants of Rapa Nui stood watch over a world defined by its limits. But what happens when the canvas for human ambition is not a fertile island, but an absolute void? The Atacama Desert in Chile is a place that defies life. It is the driest non-polar desert on Earth, a landscape where some weather stations have never recorded a single drop of rain. The soil is sterile, the sunlight brutal, and the silence is profound. Yet, etched across this vast nothingness is one of humanity's most resilient networks of ancient roads. From the ground, they appear as faint, parallel lines of cleared gravel, but from above, their true nature is revealed. They are arrow-straight pathways, some over 30 meters wide, stretching from one distant horizon to the other, connecting scattered oases and remote mining sites. These are not wandering caravan trails, but engineered highways, deliberately laid out in straight segments that march across the desert floor with unwavering purpose. Their endurance is a gift of the very environment that made them so difficult to build. In a place where it never rains, there is no water to wash them away. The lack of plant life means no roots can crack their foundations. For over 3,000 years, these roads have simply lain there, preserved under a relentless sun, a fossilized map of movement in a land that seems to forbid it. This preservation is what makes them so hauntingly clear, but it is their existence that poses the real question. Why here? The answer lies in what the desert held, not on its surface but within it. The Atacama was a treasure trove of vital resources for ancient Andean cultures, rich deposits of obsidian for tools, copper for ornaments, and precious minerals like lapis lazuli and turquoise. The roads were the lifelines to these riches, but establishing such a network in the Atacama was an act of profound logistical courage. Every single requirement for human survival had to be imported. Water, food, building materials, all of it had to be carried in along the very routes being built. The organizational effort is staggering to consider. Way stations, known as tambos, were established at precise intervals, a day's travel apart, offering minimal shelter and, crucially, cached supplies of water. This was a supply chain operating in a vacuum, a self-sustained loop of humanity pushing into the void to extract wealth and then transport it back to the world of the living. The people who walked these roads, likely llama caravans guided by specialists who knew the location of every hidden water seep, were engaging in a high-stakes ritual of survival. A single broken water jar, a missed landmark, or a prolonged sandstorm could mean the end. These straight, wide roads, then, were not just paths of least resistance, they were paths of maximum certainty. In a featureless landscape where drifting off course meant death, the road itself was the guide, a physical manifestation of a collective memory so vital it was literally carved into the face of the desert. They represent a different kind of monument, not one of spiritual statement, but of sheer, stubborn necessity. A testament to the lengths we will go to connect what is valuable with what is possible. The desert's stark, preserved highways speak of survival in a void, but to find a road that seems to defy the very logic of its own environment, we must enter a world of overwhelming green. Deep within the Patane rainforest of Guatemala and Mexico, the ancient Maya civilization thrived in a landscape that was both generous and merciless. Here, they did not just clear paths, they built highways in the sky. These were the Sacbeob, meaning white roads, and they represent one of history's most audacious acts of landscape domination. Imagine standing in a dense, tangled jungle, a place where visibility ends just a few feet ahead, where the ground is a soft, wet sponge of roots and mud. Now, imagine a wide, elevated causeway of pure white limestone plaster cutting through that green wall, running arrows straight as far as the eye can see, disappearing into the horizon. That was the reality of a sack. These were not mere trails. They were engineered infrastructure, raised several feet above the forest floor on a foundation of rubble and stone, then paved with a thick, smooth layer of brilliant white plaster that would have gleamed under the sun and moon. Their straightness is a key to the mystery. In a jungle where traveling in a straight line is physically impossible without constant cutting, the Maya built roads that ignored the natural contours of the land. They went over hills, through swamps, and across rivers on raised embankments, maintaining their direct course with a surveying precision that feels almost modern. The scale of the undertaking is what truly defies comprehension. To build just 1 kilometer of such a road required a staggering mobilization of labor and resources. First, a wide corridor of ancient, towering rainforest had to be completely cleared, not just of undergrowth but of massive trees. Then, the limestone bedrock had to be quarried, often from miles away. This stone was broken, transported, and laid as a foundation. Finally, countless tons of limestone were burned in kilns to produce the plaster that formed the smooth, waterproof surface. The volume of material moved, and the energy expended in its production, is almost incalculable for a society using stone tools and human muscle. This forces the central question: why? What purpose could justify such a monumental investment of a civilization's strength? Was it for trade? Possibly, but many Sacbeob connect major ceremonial centers rather than purely commercial hubs. Was it for rapid military movement? The straight, raised roads would certainly allow for it, yet evidence of their primary use for war is not clear. The most compelling answer may lie in the realm of ceremony and power. These brilliant white roads, visible from the air and gleaming through the dark jungle, may have served as sacred pathways for elite processions, connecting temple cities in a physical and spiritual network. They transformed the chaotic, untamed wild into an ordered, civilized space, a literal high road for kings and priests to travel above the common world. The Sacbeob were more than transportation, they were statements of control, proving that the Maya could not only live within the jungle, but could reshape it into a geometry of their own divine authority. The gleaming white roads of the Maya demonstrate a civilization mastering its environment through sheer will. Yet for the ultimate expression of that will, a single structure that has defined ancient mystery for millennia, we must return to the sands of Egypt. The Great Pyramid of Giza is the benchmark against which all other ancient wonders are measured. Its construction is a symphony of precision, with millions of limestone blocks weighing multiple tons each, fitted together with gaps thinner than a credit card. But the central, enduring question is not about the quarrying or the placement, it is about the ascent. How did the builders lift those colossal stones to a height of nearly 500 feet? The answer, everyone agrees, involves ramps. But the nature of those ramps is where consensus ends and one of history's greatest engineering debates begins. For generations, the standard image in textbooks has been that of a massive, straight external ramp, a colossal earthen highway leaning against the pyramid's side, growing taller as the structure rose. It is a logical, intuitive solution. However, when engineers and archaeologists run the numbers, this simple idea collapses under its own weight. A straight ramp long and gentle enough to drag a 2.5-ton block to the top of the Great Pyramid would have to be over a mile in length. The volume of material, brick and earth, needed to build such a ramp would have been greater than the volume of the pyramid itself. Think about that for a moment. It would mean the builders first had to construct a mountain of rubble just to build their stone mountain. Then, once the pyramid was complete, they would have faced the equally monumental task of dismantling this auxiliary mountain entirely, leaving no trace, which no historical record or archaeological finding supports. This problem led to the proposal of a zigzagging ramp, a single path winding up one face of the pyramid. This would be shorter and require less material. But it introduces a new set of crippling issues. The corners where the ramp turned would have been impossibly tight for teams of hundreds of men pulling a massive block on sledges. The engineering stress on the pyramid's edges at these turning points would have been immense, and the logistical challenge of maneuvering at such a height, with no room for error, pushes the idea into the realm of the impractical. In recent years, a compelling alternative has gained traction, the theory of an internal ramp. proposed by architect Jean-Pierre Houdin. This concept suggests the builders used a straight external ramp only for the bottom third of the pyramid. For the upper two-thirds, a corkscrew ramp was built inside the pyramid's very structure, tunneling upward within the unfinished core. Blocks would be dragged along this dark, enclosed passageway, turning at the four corners where the open spaces of the pyramid's central chambers would have provided the necessary room to pivot. This elegant theory solves many problems. It requires vastly less external material. It explains how precise corner alignment could be maintained from within, and it accounts for the absence of any massive ramp remnants. Supporting evidence includes microgravimetric surveys that have hinted at less dense, spiral-shaped anomalies within the pyramid, possibly the ghostly imprint of those ancient construction tunnels. Yet, even this brilliant idea is not without its critics and unanswered questions. The logistics of operating in a confined, dark interior ramp at such a scale, with teams moving blocks both up and possibly down, are complex. The theory, while persuasive, still awaits definitive physical proof, and so the enigma stands. The Great Pyramid, the most studied building on Earth, still guards the secret of its own construction. Egyptologists, architects, and engineers have proposed dozens of variations on these ramp themes, from levers to water locks, but a single, universally accepted blueprint has never been found. This is the ultimate lesson of our journey. When we look at these ancient roads and ramps from the Andes to the Atacama, from Baalbek to Giza, we are not looking at puzzles with lost solutions. We are looking at the fingerprints of different kinds of genius, solutions so tailored to their time, place, and purpose that they resist our modern formulas. The ramp that built the pyramid may have been a temporary, ingenious, and perhaps beautifully simple structure that vanished with the last stone placed, leaving only the perfect, silent geometry of the result to humble us forever. While the pyramid's ramp remains a theoretical puzzle, other ancient pathways leave physical evidence etched across the planet's most formidable barriers. Far from the deserts and jungles, a different kind of road was born from pure necessity, tracing its way across the very roof of the world. Long before the legendary Silk Road became a network of imperial commerce, its precursor routes existed as fragile, perilous threads across the highest mountains on Earth. In the dizzying altitudes of the Pamir and Tian Shan ranges, where peaks scrape the sky and oxygen grows thin, archaeologists have found traces of paths that should not be there. These are not natural animal trails, but intentionally improved routes, with stones cleared, narrow cliff faces notched with handholds, and even simple retaining walls built to stabilize a track across a sheer slope. They snake through passes so high and remote that they feel beyond the realm of human travel, yet the evidence is undeniable. Someone, thousands of years ago, stood on those same wind-swept cliffs and decided to make a way. This presents a profound historical mystery. Who were these first pioneers? They predate the organized empires of Persia, Han China, or Rome that would later patrol and protect the trade routes. They likely belonged to small, nomadic communities of the Eurasian steppe. What could possibly compel a group of people, with all the daily burdens of survival, to repeatedly attempt and then systematically improve a crossing over a 16,000-foot mountain pass? The immediate answer is often trade, but this was trade of a very specific and precious kind. It was not about caravans of silk and spices, not yet. It was about the movement of ideas and small, vital commodities. Obsidian for razor-sharp tools, jade for ceremonial objects, perhaps even early forms of metallurgical knowledge traveled along these high corridors. The motivation was likely a combination of necessity and profound curiosity, a drive to connect with distant peoples who possessed different resources and knowledge. The logistics of such journeys border on the suicidal. Imagine coordinating a small party with pack animals or simply on foot across a pass where a single storm could mean freezing or a misstep could send you into a 1,000-foot abyss. They had to carry all their food and fuel, know the location of every possible meltwater stream, and understand the mountain's moods intimately. The very existence of these engineered steps and cleared paths suggests these were not one-time expeditions, but established, remembered routes passed down through generations. This knowledge itself was the most valuable cargo. The location of the pass, the safest season to cross, the way to navigate a particular glacier. This was sacred information, a geographical heirloom that gave a community its connection to a wider world. These high mountain passes represent the raw, courageous origin of globalization. They were built not by imperial decree, but by the slow, cumulative bravery of countless unknown individuals, each adding a cleared stone or a foothold to a path that would, centuries later, become the backbone of empires. They dared to look at an impassable wall of rock and ice and see not a barrier but a doorway. But high mountain passes, for all their danger, follow a clear geographic logic, a navigable line through the peaks. To find a construction that seems to reject practical logic entirely, we must journey to the windswept coast of Brittany in France. Here, scattered across the landscape like the bones of a forgotten giant, are the Carnac alignments. This is not a single monument, but a sprawling, bewildering complex of over 3,000 prehistoric standing stones, or menhirs, arranged in long, parallel rows that stretch for kilometers. From the ground, the effect is disorienting, a forest of granite pillars marching across fields and low hills in seemingly endless lines. From the air, the pattern becomes breathtaking, revealing a geometric order on a landscape scale that feels deliberately planned. The largest of these alignments, known as Manek, consists of nearly 12 perfectly straight rows containing over 1,100 stones, some standing 12 feet high. They do not form a circle, nor do they mark a burial site in any obvious way. Instead, they create what can only be described as a vast, open-air corridor, a processional highway built not of earth but of stone. The sheer scale of the labor involved is staggering. Each multi-ton menhir was quarried from local granite, shaped, transported sometimes over several miles, and then erected with its base buried deep in the earth. This was not the work of a single season or even a single generation. It was a sustained cultural project spanning centuries, a continuous act of communal will focused on one purpose, placing these stones in these precise lines. But for what? Unlike a pyramid or a temple, the alignments have no interior, no roof, no clear focal point. They create a space but do not enclose it. This has led many researchers to propose that their purpose was not architectural but experiential. They formed a ceremonial pathway. Imagine a ritual procession winding its way through these silent, towering rows, the physical act of walking this stone-lined avenue being the central sacred act. The alignments may have charted a symbolic journey, perhaps related to solar or lunar movements, with certain stones marking celestial alignments during solstices or equinoxes. They could have demarcated a sacred territory, separating the mundane world from a ritual landscape, or perhaps they served as a physical representation of a community's ancestors or deities, a permanent audience lining the route of the living. The true meaning is lost, swallowed by the millennia that have passed since the last stone was set. This loss is precisely what makes Carnac so powerfully mysterious. We can calculate the manpower needed to move the stones. We can map their precise positions, but we cannot hear the chants or understand the beliefs that compelled a society to invest its entire creative energy into building a road that goes nowhere, a destination that is the path itself. It stands as the ultimate expression of our theme, a monument where the journey was not a means to an end, but the entire point. Carnac's silent stone corridors were built for a purpose we can no longer hear. But for a road where the purpose echoes clearly through history, we travel to a land of sandstone and sun. Jordan's King's Highway is not a single forgotten monument, but a living artery, a trade route that has pulsed with life for over 5,000 years. This is not a mystery of unknown builders, but a testament to sustained imperial will. From the Egyptians and Nabateans to the Romans, Byzantines, and early Islamic caliphates, every major power in the region recognized this strip of land as the crucial corridor connecting the riches of Arabia with the ports of the Mediterranean. Its path was logical, tracing a line along the fertile highlands east of the Dead Sea, avoiding the impassable desert to the east and the deep Rift Valley to the west. But logic in terrain does not mean ease. The true engineering marvel of the King's Highway lies in the specific, brutal points where geography fought back and where generations of engineers answered with stone and determination. The route was constantly threatened by the region's dramatic wadis, deep, sheer-sided canyons carved by seasonal floods. To cross these gashes in the landscape, builders did not divert the road for miles to find a gentle slope. Instead, they attacked the cliffs directly. In numerous locations, they carved intricate switchbacks into the very face of the rock, a series of tight, zigzagging turns that allowed caravans of camels and merchants to descend into the abyss and climb back out on the other side. Walking these paths today, you can still see the grooves worn into the stone by countless wheels and hooves over centuries, a physical record of relentless passage. Even more impressive are the monumental retaining walls. In places where the road needed to traverse a crumbling slope or skirt a precipice, engineers built supporting walls of massive, unmortared stone blocks, some standing 30 feet high. These were not decorative, they were functional buttresses holding the mountainside at bay, literally creating a stable ledge where none existed before. The cumulative effort here is what defies easy understanding. This was not a one-time construction project completed by a single king. This was a continuous, multi-millennial maintenance contract. Landslides would bury a section and a Roman legion would clear it. A flash flood would wash out a retaining wall, and a Byzantine crew would rebuild it, often reusing the same stones. Each empire inherited the road from its predecessor, understood its vital economic and military importance, and invested its own resources into keeping it open. The King's Highway represents a different kind of ancient wonder, one built not in a single burst of glory, but through the slow, stubborn accumulation of effort across ages. It was a strategic asset so valuable that its upkeep became a permanent line item in the budget of civilizations. The road itself became the empire, a stone and dirt manifestation of control that demanded constant care, linking distant provinces not just through space, but through a shared, unbroken history of engineering perseverance. The King's Highway was a permanent artery maintained across empires. But what happens when a road is built not to connect but to end something? On a remote, mesa-like plateau overlooking the Dead Sea, the answer is carved into the desert in the form of a brutal and brilliant act of military will. The fortress of Masada, a natural citadel with sheer cliffs on all sides, was the final stronghold of a Jewish rebel group after the fall of Jerusalem to the Romans. For the Roman 10th Legion, the military problem was absolute. The cliffs were unassailable, and a long siege was possible but politically unacceptable. Their commander, Lucius Flavius Silva, made a decision that still echoes as a statement of imperial power. He would not wait for starvation to do its work. He would build a ramp to the top. This was not a simple path. It was an act of geological violence, the deliberate construction of a new mountain against the old one. Using Jewish prisoners of war as labor, the legion directed the movement of thousands upon thousands of tons of earth and stone. They quarried from the surrounding hills, filling woven baskets and carrying them in an endless human chain. Day by day, week by week, they pushed an earthen tongue up the western side of the rock, a gradually ascending platform that grew to over 200 meters in length and reached a height of nearly 100 meters. The scale is difficult to comprehend from the ground, but from a distance, the ramp remains a stark, pale scar on the mountainside, a permanent wound. The logistics behind this offensive earthwork are as staggering as the ramp itself. The Roman army encamped at the base was vast, requiring a constant, monumental supply chain stretching back to distant provinces. Every soldier and laborer needed daily rations of food and water in a landscape that provided neither. The organization required to sustain this workforce while simultaneously directing the precise engineering of the ramp speaks to the unmatched mechanical mind of the Roman military machine. But the ramp was more than just an engineering solution. It was a psychological weapon made visible. Every basket of earth carried up its growing slope was a message to the defenders watching from above. It said the Romans would not be denied, that they possessed not just the might, but the patience and the ingenuity to literally reshape the world to achieve their goal. They were demonstrating that no natural defense was absolute, that human will, when marshaled by an empire, could conquer geography itself. The ramp at Masada was a mountain built to conquer a mountain, and its silent, sloping form remains one of history's most chilling monuments to the absolute determination of a siege. Masada's siege ramp was a mountain built with a single, brutal purpose. But in the stark, sun-baked mountains of Oman, there is a road that seems to have been carved not by intention, but by obsession. It leads to a place of both beauty and mystery, the Bimmah Sinkhole, a stunning turquoise pool nestled in a limestone crater near the coast. The sinkhole itself is a natural wonder, likely formed by the collapse of an underground cavern. Yet the path that approaches it is anything but natural. Worn directly into the bedrock is a deep, smooth groove, a channel so pronounced it looks like a riverbed for giants. This is not a casual footpath. The stone itself has been hollowed out by the passage of countless feet, hooves, or wheels over a span of time, so vast it defies our usual historical scales. Geologists and archaeologists who have studied the site agree this is a man-made track, but one created through a process of relentless erosion rather than construction. Each traveler, over centuries and perhaps millennia, contributed a minuscule amount of wear. The cumulative effect, however, is a roadway etched several feet deep into solid rock, a permanent scar on the landscape that speaks of a journey repeated with an almost ritual frequency. The mystery lies in what compelled such consistent traffic. What was the destination's pull? The sinkhole holds fresh water, a treasure beyond price in the arid Omani landscape, making it a logical oasis. It could have been a vital watering stop for ancient caravans moving along the coast, a place where camels were led down this very groove to drink. Yet the scale of the erosion suggests something more than occasional use. This feels like a pilgrimage. Perhaps the pool was considered sacred, a gift from the earth or the heavens, drawing people from distant communities for ceremonies or offerings. It might have been a crucial source of a specific resource, not just water, but perhaps minerals or clay found only in its depths. The groove does not wander, it aims directly for the sinkhole's edge, indicating a singular, unwavering purpose for the journey. To stand beside it and run a hand along its smooth, concave wall is to feel the ghost of an immense collective memory. How many generations walked this exact line? What stories did they tell about the luminous pool at the end of this stone river? The Bimmah track offers no inscriptions, no monuments, no clear answers. It is a road that is its own archive, a library written in the slow, patient language of erosion, recording a need so fundamental and enduring that it literally changed the face of the world. This relentless wearing of stone by countless journeys finds a strange and specific echo in another corner of the ancient world, where a road was built not for feet, but for the hulls of ships. On the narrow isthmus of Corinth in Greece, a strip of land barely 6 kilometers wide separates two vital seas, the Aegean and the Ionian. For a sailor in antiquity, the choice was grim: embark on an extra 400-kilometer voyage around the southern tip of the Peloponnese, a journey infamous for treacherous winds and rocky shores, or find another way. The Corinthians, ever the practical merchants and naval power, chose a third option, one of breathtaking audacity. They built a road for their boats. This was the Diolkos, a paved trackway of cut limestone blocks, running from one coast to the other. But this was no ordinary road. Embedded in its surface were parallel grooves, precisely spaced, designed to guide the wheels of a massive, wheeled platform called a Diolkos after the road itself. The procedure was a spectacle of organized labor. A ship would be unloaded, its cargo placed on carts. Then, using cranes or levers, the vessel itself would be hauled out of the water and secured onto this special wooden cradle. Teams of men, and likely oxen, would then pull this incredible load, a warship or a merchant vessel riding on a carriage, along the stone highway, across the isthmus, and down into the waters on the other side. The scale of the concept is what staggers the modern mind. This was not a secret portage for small fishing boats. This was a major, state-funded infrastructure project, a paved, maintained public work over 8 kilometers long, built to accommodate the largest vessels of the era. The grooves in the stone, still visible in sections today, show the wear of countless such transits. Imagine the scene, the creak of massive timbers, the shouts of overseers, the strain of hundreds of men moving a trireme, a ship weighing dozens of tons over solid ground. Why go to such phenomenal effort? The economic and military imperative must have been overwhelming. For merchants, the Diolkos slashed weeks off a trading voyage, avoiding the dangerous southern cape and getting goods to market faster. For the Corinthian navy, it was a strategic masterstroke. It meant their warships could be transferred from one sea to the other in a matter of hours, not days, allowing them to respond to threats with a speed no rival could match. They could effectively control 2 naval theaters with one fleet. The cost of building and maintaining the Diolkos and the immense labor for each crossing must have been colossal. Yet for centuries it was deemed worth the price. This singular road forces us to reconsider ancient priorities. It reveals a society that saw no barrier as insurmountable, not even the solid earth between 2 seas. When a geographic shortcut was needed, they did not just map a new route. They engineered one from stone, transforming the very idea of a road into a machine for moving the sea itself. The Diolkos was a triumph of human ingenuity over geography, a road that conquered the sea by moving ships across land. But what happens when the challenge is not horizontal distance, but vertical space? The solution is not a ramp but a staircase, repeated thousands of times until it becomes the very fabric of a city. High in the Peruvian Andes, clinging to a saddle between 2 cloud-wreathed peaks, Machu Picchu presents perhaps the most elegant answer to the problem of impossible terrain. This lost city of the Inca is not a collection of buildings placed upon a mountain. It is a structure carved from the mountain itself, and its most fundamental, omnipresent feature is the staircase. Over 100 separate flights of stone steps stitch the city together, ascending and descending with the contours of the ridge, turning a nearly vertical landscape into a breathtakingly functional urban space. These are not afterthoughts or rough paths. Each stairway is a masterwork of stone masonry, built with the same precision and care as the temples and palaces they connect. The stones are cut to fit together without mortar, their edges worn smooth by centuries of rain and footfall, yet their alignments remain perfectly true. They navigate sudden changes in elevation, wrap around outcrops of living bedrock, and provide access to terraces, residences, and ceremonial plazas with an intuitive flow that feels both planned and organic. The mystery of Machu Picchu's stairways is not in the technique of a single step which the Inca perfected. It is in the holistic, overwhelming scale of the effort. Every single pathway in this remote, sky-high sanctuary is an engineered work of art. This represents a total commitment to a vision, a refusal to compromise with the mountain. The builders did not simply find the easiest route between 2 points. They imposed a human order upon the cliffs, creating a network of stone veins that gave the city its lifeblood of movement. This vertical urban planning achieved something profound. It seamlessly blended brutal function with sacred geography. A staircase was not just a way to get from the agricultural terraces to the Sun Temple. It was a ceremonial ascent, a physical manifestation of a journey between the earthly and the divine. To walk these steps today is to feel the genius of a civilization that saw no separation between the practical need to navigate their home and the spiritual act of honoring the mountain that cradled it. The entire city becomes a staircase to the sky, each flight a testament to the belief that even the most daunting ascent could be mastered, one perfectly placed stone at a time. Yet the stairways of Machu Picchu, for all their beauty, served a city. To find a road built to serve an empire, we must travel to a landscape of open plains and high plateaus. The Achaemenid Persian Empire, at its height, was the largest the world had ever seen, stretching from the Aegean Sea to the Indus River. Holding such a vast domain together required more than armies. It required information to move at the speed of a galloping horse. The solution was the Royal Road, a feat of administrative ambition that remains staggering even today. Stretching an estimated 2,700 kilometers from the imperial capital of Susa to the city of Sardis near the coast of modern Turkey. This was not a single, continuous paved highway like a Roman road. Instead, it was a meticulously organized and maintained corridor, a designated route with way stations, bridges, and ferries established at precise intervals. Its most famous characteristic, recorded by the Greek historian Herodotus, was its remarkable straightness across long stretches, particularly on the Anatolian plateau. Achieving such directness across hundreds of kilometers of rolling, varied terrain was a monumental surveying achievement long before the invention of the theodolite or GPS. Teams of surveyors, using simple sighting poles and perhaps smoke signals, must have worked for years to plot these long, unwavering lines, choosing the most efficient path possible and refusing to deviate for minor obstacles. This straightness served a single, vital purpose: speed. The true genius of the Royal Road was its relay system. Along its entire length, at intervals of approximately 1 day's ride, were royal way stations stocked with fresh horses and dedicated couriers. A royal message or an important traveler would not be carried by a single man on a single horse until exhaustion. Instead, the message itself became a baton in a relentless race. A courier would ride at full gallop from one station to the next, hand the dispatches to a fresh rider on a fresh horse, who would immediately continue the sprint. In this manner, it is said a message could travel the entire length of the road in just 7 days, a journey that would take a normal caravan 3 months. Imagine the logistical symphony required to sustain this system, maintaining hundreds of horses, feed, and personnel in remote locations, ensuring security and guaranteeing the chain never broke. This was not merely a road, it was a central nervous system made of dirt and determination. The scale of this administrative infrastructure was unprecedented, a physical manifestation of imperial will that allowed a single king to know what was happening on his farthest frontier almost as soon as it occurred. The Royal Road demonstrates that the greatest ancient constructions were not always made of stone, but of systems, a network of trust and organization laid across the earth to make an empire feel like a single, unified realm. But Persia's Royal Road was a network of light and open movement, a public artery of imperial power. For a civilization that chose to build its roads in absolute darkness, we must descend into the earth itself. In the hauntingly beautiful landscape of Cappadocia, Turkey, the soft volcanic rock tells a story not of what was built upon it, but of what was carved out from within it. Here, the roads do not cross the surface, they plunge beneath it, connecting not towns but entire hidden cities. These are not simple caves or shelters. They are vast, multi-level subterranean metropolises, with some complexes like Derinkuyu descending an astonishing 18 stories deep. The tunnels connecting these levels are the true marvel, a labyrinthine highway system engineered for an entire population to vanish from the world above. Walking these narrow, sloping passages today, you are treading on roads of survival. They were not built for trade or ceremony, but for a single, overwhelming purpose: to protect a community from existential threat. The scale of excavation is almost impossible to comprehend. Using simple hand tools, generations of people patiently hollowed out the soft, tough rock, removing millions of tons of material to create not just rooms, but streets, storerooms, chapels, wineries, and stables, all stacked vertically and connected by this network of arterial tunnels. The engineering sophistication is what elevates this from a hideout to a masterpiece of underground urban planning. Ventilation shafts, some stretching over 100 feet to the surface, provided fresh air to the deepest levels. Ingenious rolling stone doors, massive circular slabs of rock that could be sealed from the inside, blocked key passageways against intrusion. Elaborate wells tapped into underground water sources, and communal kitchens were strategically placed to manage smoke. This was a society that had planned for a life in the shadows, organizing itself around a permanent, large-scale defensive contingency. The enigma lies in the collective psychology and effort this represents. What level of sustained peril could motivate not just a family or a village, but an entire regional culture to invest centuries of labor in creating a secret world beneath their feet? It speaks to a history of profound uncertainty, where the safety of the sunlit world could not be guaranteed. These underground highways were a civilization's insurance policy, a hidden roadmap to resilience carved in stone, ensuring that no matter what happened on the surface, the community itself could endure, moving and living in the silent, secure darkness they had meticulously prepared for themselves. Yet the underground highways of Cappadocia were built for survival, a hidden world of retreat. For a civilization that built its roads as a stage for the gods, we must emerge into the blinding sun of ancient Mesopotamia. Here, in the heart of Babylon, the streets were not meant for hiding, but for the most spectacular display imaginable. The city's legendary Processional Way was a masterpiece of urban theater, a paved corridor of power that turned a religious parade into a statement of cosmic authority. At its heart stood the Ishtar Gate, a towering edifice of glazed brick in a brilliant, impossible blue, adorned with rows of golden lions and dragons, the sacred animals of the goddess Ishtar and the god Marduk. This gate was not merely an entrance, it was a portal between the human and divine realms, and the road that passed through it was worthy of that passage. For nearly half a mile, this main avenue was paved with massive slabs of white limestone and red breccia, each stone carefully fitted. Flanking the entire route were high walls, also faced in that luminous blue brick, decorated with over 120 glazed reliefs of striding lions, each nearly 6 feet long. The visual effect must have been overwhelming, a shimmering, fortified canyon of sacred imagery guiding the procession forward. While its beauty is rightfully famous, the scale of its construction as a purely ceremonial project is what challenges our modern sense of utility. This was not a trade route or a military highway. Its primary purpose was to serve the annual New Year's festival, when the statues of the gods would be carried from their temples along this sacred path to a special shrine outside the city, and then back in triumphant return. The entire city would line these walls to witness the spectacle. Now consider the resources poured into this single, symbolic corridor. The glazed bricks required precise, high-temperature kilns and rare mineral pigments to achieve their vibrant colors. The sheer volume of stone paving, quarried from distant lands and transported to the flat Mesopotamian plain, represents a logistical undertaking of imperial proportions. The labor of artists and masons to create and set each intricate relief was immense. All of this effort, this staggering concentration of wealth and skill, was devoted to a pathway used for a handful of days each year. This reveals a profound truth about the Babylonian worldview. Practical necessity was secondary to the demonstration of symbolic power. The processional way was a physical contract between the king, the people, and the gods. Its lavishness proved the king's piety and his ability to command the resources of the earth to honor the heavens. It fortified not the city against armies, but the social order against chaos, reinforcing the belief that Babylon was the center of the universe, protected by its divine patrons. To walk that blue and gold avenue was to participate in a ritual that reaffirmed the very structure of reality, a journey where every gleaming brick underfoot whispered that this civilization and its connection to the gods was built to last forever. But the gleaming blue bricks of Babylon were built to last for eternity in the dry desert air. In the damp, misty wetlands of prehistoric Europe, a different kind of road was being built with an opposite expectation, one of quiet surrender to the earth. These were the timber trackways, highways not of stone but of wood, laid across treacherous, waterlogged bogs that could swallow a person whole. The most famous of these is the Sweet Track in Somerset, England, a pathway that has lain hidden in the peat for nearly 6,000 years. Discovered in the 1970s, it was not a haphazard pile of branches. It was a precisely engineered structure, a raised walkway built from long planks of split oak, pegged firmly into the underlying peat with sharpened wooden stakes and supported by crossed rails beneath to distribute weight. This was sophisticated carpentry, executed in a time before metal tools, in conditions that were perpetually wet and unstable. The puzzle here is not the destination, which was likely a dry island in the marsh or a vital hunting ground. The puzzle is the monumental, communal effort required to build it. Consider the process. First, mature oak trees had to be selected, felled with stone axes, and then expertly split into planks using wooden wedges and mauls. This alone is a task of immense skill and labor. Then, this heavy, cumbersome timber had to be transported, likely by hand or by rolling, across the very soft, pathless bog it was meant to conquer. Hundreds of planks, each several meters long, along with thousands of pegs and rails, all had to be brought to the site. Finally, teams worked in the cold water and mud, driving stakes, aligning planks, and locking everything into place to create a stable, dry path above the sucking mire. Why go to such phenomenal trouble? The answer reshapes our view of these landscapes. What we see today as barren, inhospitable wetlands were, for our ancestors, lands of incredible richness. The bogs were frontiers of vital resources, teeming with fish, waterfowl, and edible plants. They provided peat for fuel and, crucially, offered natural defensive boundaries. The trackways were the bridges that made this resource-rich frontier accessible and safe. They turned a perilous, trackless morass into a regulated corridor, controlling movement and allowing communities to exploit the wealth of the wetlands without risking their lives with every step. The Sweet Track and others like it across northern Europe were not casual footpaths. They were investments built by a coordinated society that understood the value of the bog and was willing to expend a staggering amount of its collective energy to build a highway across a swamp. These wooden roads, preserved by the very peat that once threatened travelers, are silent testaments to a forgotten truth that nowhere was truly nowhere to the people who called it home. While the Sweet Track was a quiet path to survival, other ancient ramps were born from the opposite impulse, a declaration of conquest meant to be seen for miles. Among the most formidable of these were not roads for travel, but ramps for destruction, the colossal earthen embankments built to breach the walls of legendary cities. The archaeology of sites like ancient Troy reveals not just a city, but a landscape scarred by the physics of siege. When a fortified settlement's walls proved too strong for direct assault, attacking armies resorted to a tactic of overwhelming patience and mass. They built their own mountain right up to the battlements. This was not a simple scaling ladder of dirt. Constructing a functional siege ramp was an engineering project of terrifying scale, conducted within range of the defenders' arrows and stones. Imagine the scene: thousands of soldiers, often aided by conscripted prisoners or slaves, working in shifts day and night. Their tools were baskets, shovels, and sheer muscle. Their material was everything they could gather: earth, rubble, stones, and even the timbers from shattered siege engines. Basket by heavy basket, they extended an earthen tongue toward the high walls, each load dumped and packed to create a stable, sloping avenue for their final assault. The volume of material moved is almost incomprehensible. To build a ramp high enough and wide enough to support a column of armored troops storming a 30-foot wall could require moving tens of thousands of tons of earth. And this entire, vulnerable earthwork had to be protected from defenders who would rain fire down upon it and launch sorties to burn the wooden reinforcing structures within. The ramp at Masada was a later, perfect example of this grim calculus, but the principle was ancient. These constructions were more than tactical tools. They were psychological weapons made visible. Every basket of dirt carried up the growing slope was a message to the people watching from the walls. It communicated an unshakable resolve, a promise that the attackers would not tire, would not retreat, and would literally reshape the world to achieve their goal. The ramp was a physical countdown, its steady ascent marking the inevitable approach of the final, brutal confrontation. The sheer scale of effort invested tells us something profound about the value of the target. A city was not just a collection of buildings, it was a repository of wealth, a hub of power, a symbol. To spend months of a campaign and risk countless lives just to build a road to its walls meant that capturing it was worth the price of a man-made mountain. These ramparts of earth stand as silent, sloping testimonies to the ultimate equation of ancient conflict, measuring the worth of a city in the millions of baskets of dirt required to take it. Far from the sun-baked deserts and jungles, a different kind of ancient road was carved through the cold, dense forests of North America. Around the vast freshwater sea of Lake Superior, the ground holds a secret, not of gold or silver, but of a metal that shaped the earliest chapters of human technology: pure elemental copper. For thousands of years, long before European contact, indigenous peoples mined this copper from pits and trenches scattered across the region, most notably on Michigan's Keweenaw Peninsula and Isle Royale. The copper itself, found in astonishingly pure nodules sometimes weighing hundreds of pounds, is a marvel. But the true testament to the scale of this enterprise lies not just in the pits, but in the paths leading away from them. Archaeologists have traced networks of ancient roads, portage routes, and water trails that formed a sophisticated transportation web. These were not casual footpaths. The evidence points to heavy, repeated traffic over centuries, routes worn deep by the passage of countless travelers carrying an immensely dense and valuable cargo. Imagine the journey: a copper nodule, rough and reddish-brown, weighing as much as a person, was extracted from a deep pit using stone hammers and fire. It then had to be transported, likely by a team of individuals, along a forest trail to a nearby waterway. From there, it would begin an epic voyage by canoe across the unpredictable waters of the Great Lakes. The logistical coordination this implies is profound. These miners were not working in isolation. The sheer volume of copper removed, estimated to be in the millions of pounds, and its distribution across half a continent tells a story of a vast, organized trade network. Finished copper artifacts from this ancient source have been found in burial mounds and ritual sites as far away as the Ohio River Valley, the southeast, and even into the plains. This means the raw material from Lake Superior was traveling hundreds, sometimes over 1,000 miles, passing through the hands of many different cultures. What was exchanged for it? Perhaps rare shells from the Gulf Coast, distinctive chert for tools from distant quarries, or ceremonial objects like pipestone. The economic and cultural impact of this trade must have been immense, weaving together distant communities in a web of mutual need and shared technology. Yet the full structure of this network remains one of archaeology's great puzzles. Who coordinated the mining seasons, the transportation, the exchange? How was the knowledge of these routes and the value of the copper transmitted across generations and cultural boundaries? The ancient copper roads of Michigan are silent, overgrown now, but they whisper of a continent connected by commerce and craftsmanship long before written history began, a hidden highway of the atomic age of its day, moving the very element that would one day carry our voices and power our world. The silent copper roads of North America were carved for trade and survival. Yet halfway across the world, an entire civilization built its roads not to move goods, but to hold the very soil of its home in place. In the cloud-wrapped mountains of the Philippine Cordilleras, the Banaue rice terraces are often called the eighth wonder of the world. We see them as breathtaking stairways to the sky, but to the Ifugao people who built and maintained them, they represent something far more profound, a vast, living network of agricultural roads. This is not a single path, but an entire engineered landscape where every terrace wall is a roadway for water, and every narrow dike is a footpath for a farmer. The scale is almost beyond human comprehension. Carved into the mountainsides over 2,000 years ago by hand with minimal tools, the terraces stretch for over 10,000 square kilometers. If placed end to end, the stone and mud retaining walls would circle half the globe. This is not a monument built by a king, but by countless generations of families, each adding and repairing their small section of an immortal design. The system operates on a principle of perfect balance. Mountain springs are tapped high up, and the water is channeled through a meticulously maintained network of canals and bamboo pipes. It then begins its slow, gravity-fed descent from one tiny, level paddock to the next, following the stone-bordered pathways that are the terrace's lifeblood. A farmer walking along the narrow top of a wall is literally traversing the highway of this system, checking flows, clearing blockages, and ensuring the life-giving journey of the water continues all the way down the mountain. The true engineering marvel lies in this sustainability. The walls are not cemented, they are masterful dry stone constructions that allow for seepage and adjustment, preventing catastrophic collapse. The mud layers are carefully maintained. This entire, staggering feat of landscape architecture exists for a single, vital purpose: to create flat land where none existed, to make the vertical world cultivable. It transforms a sheer, treacherous slope into a series of accessible, productive steps. The paths along the dikes are the roads of daily life, connecting homes to fields and families to their ancestral work. To stand among them is to understand a different relationship with scale. The grandeur is not in a single, towering rampart, but in the cumulative, patient effort of centuries, a testament to the power of incremental, communal will. The Banaue rice terraces are a road system built not to conquer distance, but to conquer gravity itself, creating a mountainside of nourishment one stone at a time forever. The stone pathways of Banaue were built to sustain life across generations, but beneath the green veil of another jungle, an entire civilization's footprint was erased, only to be rediscovered from the air. For centuries, the dominant narrative of the Amazon rainforest was one of a pristine wilderness, sparsely populated by small, nomadic tribes who lived in harmony with an untamed environment. This was not just an assumption, it was a cornerstone of archaeological thought. Then, a new eye opened in the sky. Light detection and ranging, or LiDAR, is a technology that uses laser pulses to map the ground beneath a forest canopy, digitally stripping away millions of leaves and branches to reveal the shape of the Earth itself. When archaeologists first flew LiDAR-equipped planes over sections of the Bolivian and Brazilian Amazon, the images that returned were not just surprising, they were revolutionary. The blank green canvas of the map dissolved, replaced by a sprawling, intricate blueprint of a lost world. Beneath the dense foliage, the lasers revealed vast networks of causeways and raised roads, some stretching for dozens of miles in perfectly straight lines. They uncovered enormous geometric earthworks, perfect circles, squares, and octagons formed by ditches and banks. They found the outlines of fortified settlements, plaza complexes, and what appeared to be sophisticated water management systems, including canals and reservoirs. This was not evidence of small, isolated groups. This was the signature of large, complex, and interconnected societies that had extensively engineered their entire landscape on a regional scale. The shock to the academic community was profound. It forced a complete rewrite of Amazonian history. Here was evidence of populations that likely numbered in the millions, who had transformed their environment not through exploitation, but through a form of large-scale, beneficial landscape architecture. They had built roads that connected ceremonial centers, raised fields for agriculture in the seasonally flooded savannas, and created mounds for habitation and defense. The mystery this presents is twofold, each part as compelling as the other. First, the how. How did these pre-Columbian cultures, without metal tools or wheeled transport, manage such a colossal reorganization of their world? The causeways alone represent a staggering mobilization of labor, moving millions of cubic feet of earth by hand. The geometric precision of the earthworks suggests a sophisticated understanding of surveying and mathematics, applied not to stone monuments but to the soil itself. They were not just living in the Amazon, they were gardening it on a continental scale, creating a productive, managed ecosystem that could support vast numbers of people. This leads directly to the second, more haunting question, the why of their disappearance. What happened to this interconnected network of pathways and settlements? The LiDAR images show a landscape that was clearly occupied, organized, and then abandoned. The forest did not conquer a wilderness, it reclaimed a garden. The prevailing theory points to a catastrophic collision with old-world diseases brought by European contact, illnesses that raced along these very roads and waterways faster than the explorers themselves, devastating populations that had no immunity. The social fabric that maintained the earthworks and roads unraveled, and the jungle, always waiting at the edges, slowly draped its green curtain over the works of a civilization. These geoglyph pathways, now silent and hidden, are more than just roads, they are the ghostly arteries of a lost world, a stunning reminder that the deepest wilderness can sometimes be the most profound monument of all. High in the rugged northern highlands of Ethiopia, a different kind of stone road was born from isolation and ambition. The Axumite Empire, a contemporary of Rome and Persia, rose to power as a vital hub on trade routes linking the Mediterranean with India. Its capital, Axum, sat on a high plateau, a natural fortress far from the coast. This geographical strength was also its greatest challenge, for all its wealth in ivory, gold, and frankincense had to travel to and from the Red Sea ports. The solution was not to avoid the mountains, but to cut directly through them. Axumite engineers carved permanent highways into the very bones of the landscape. These were not mere trails, but engineered roads featuring steep, durable stairways cut from solid bedrock and supported pathways that clung to the sides of sheer cliffs. Walking one of these ancient routes, you can still see the precise chisel marks where workers painstakingly quarried a passageway wide enough for laden camels and merchants. In some sections, the road becomes a dramatic staircase ascending a near-vertical rock face. each step worn smooth by countless feet over centuries. In others, it transforms into a narrow ledge supported by retaining walls of massive, unmortared stone, a man-made shelf overlooking dizzying drops into river valleys far below. The scale of this effort is what truly defines the Axumite achievement. This was not a single project, but a sustained, empire-wide program to integrate a fractured, mountainous realm. Every mile of this stone corridor represented an immense investment of labor and time, mobilizing workers for years to achieve what nature had made impassable. Consider the process for just one cliffside section. Teams would have to survey the route, then use iron chisels and stone hammers to painstakingly peck away at the granite, inch by agonizing inch, to create a level surface. Rubble would be cleared, supporting walls would be built from the fallen stone, and drainage channels would be cut to prevent erosion from seasonal rains. This work, repeated across dozens of mountain passes, speaks to a centralized power of remarkable confidence and organizational skill. It tells us the Axumite kings could command not just armies, but generations of laborers, binding their scattered kingdom together with ribbons of stone. These roads were the empire's lifelines, ensuring that the wealth of the world could flow up to the highland capital, and that the king's authority could flow back down to the coast. They turned a landscape of barriers into a network of control, proving that even the most forbidding terrain could be mastered by a society determined to connect its destiny to the wider world. A single thread connects the arrow-straight roads of the Amazon to the copper trails of Lake Superior. It is a question not of how, but of why on such a staggering scale. When we examine these ancient pathways together, a paradox emerges. Their immense effort often seems disconnected from any simple, practical need, a ramp wide enough for 10 chariots when 2 would suffice. A gleaming blue processional way used only days a year, a stone highway carved along a cloud-piercing cliff where a simple trail might have served. This recurring gap between utility and grandeur is the most compelling clue to the ancient mindset. It suggests that for these cultures, the purpose of these constructions was layered, woven from more than just function. One dominant theory points to raw political power. A king who could command a mountain to be moved or a desert to be crossed with a straight road was demonstrating a god-like authority over both nature and people. The ramp at Masada was not just a tool, it was a slow, visible promise of inevitable conquest. The royal road was a nervous system proving the king's will could travel faster than rumor. These were statements in stone and earth, declaring that the ruler's reach was as long as the road itself. Equally powerful was the pull of the divine. Many of these paths were likely sacred journeys made physical. The Nazca lines may have been walked in ritual processions to summon life-giving water from the arid sky. The silent stone rose at Carnac could have guided the living through a landscape of ancestral spirits. The Sacbeob of the Maya, gleaming white through the dark jungle, were not just highways but bridges between the human world and the realm of the gods. The act of building the road itself might have been a devotional act, a collective offering of labor to earn celestial favor. On a societal level, the very act of construction could have been the point. Mobilizing thousands of people for a decades-long project creates powerful social glue. It forges a shared identity, a common purpose that transcends individual lives. The generations who worked on the Great Pyramid or the Banaue rice terraces were not just building infrastructure, they were building a civilization, stone by stone, terrace by terrace. Their shared sweat and purpose became the foundation of their community, creating a literal common ground, and we cannot overlook the celestial map. For cultures deeply attuned to the sky, these roads might have been terrestrial reflections of heavenly order. Their precise alignments could chart the sun's solstice path, mirror the Milky Way, or point to significant stars, turning the landscape itself into a colossal astronomical observatory and calendar. The straight line, then, was not just efficient, it was sacred geometry. So, was this over-engineering a miscalculation? The evidence suggests it was the entire intention. The scale was the message. A merely functional road says we needed to get from here to there. A monumental road, one that reshapes cliffs and consumes generations, says something far deeper about who we are, what we believe, and our place in the cosmos. It tells the gods, the neighbors, and the people themselves that this society is permanent, powerful, and aligned with the fundamental order of the universe. The extra width, the impossible straightness, the relentless ascent, these were not inefficiencies. They were the signature of a civilization writing its legacy directly onto the earth. The numbers behind these monuments reveal a second, hidden layer of impossibility. We can marvel at the size of a stone or the length of a road, but the true test of an ancient society's capability lies in a far more fundamental resource: the ability to feed its own ambition. Take the theoretical ramp needed to build the Great Pyramid. If we assume a workforce of 20,000 men, as some estimates suggest, the logistical reality becomes a puzzle of its own. Each laborer required a basic diet to sustain that brutal work, likely around 3,000 calories a day. That translates into tens of thousands of loaves of bread, vats of beer, and portions of fish or legumes every single day for over 20 years. But the workers on the ramp were only the tip of a vast, unseen iceberg. For every man cutting stone or hauling a sled, there were many more behind the scenes: farmers growing the grain, bakers turning it into food, potters making storage jars, fishermen on the Nile, and administrators coordinating this river of sustenance. Historians suggest the support population could have been 4 or 5 times the size of the direct labor force. This means a temporary city of 100,000 people or more needed to be fed, housed, and managed in the desert near Giza, a place with no natural resources of its own. Where did all this food come from? It points to an agricultural surplus in the Nile Valley of almost unimaginable scale and efficiency, a level of bureaucratic control over harvests, storage, and distribution that rivals modern supply chains. The pyramid is not just a pile of stones, it is a mountain of bread, a monument to administrative genius as much as engineering. The same chilling arithmetic applies to the Baalbek ramp. Moving an 800-ton block requires a shallow incline and a ramp of staggering volume. The workforce needed just to build that earthen mountain before even touching the stone would have been colossal, concentrated in a valley with limited local farmland. How were they sustained? The historical models we have for the population and agricultural output of the region during that era struggle to account for such a concentrated, voracious demand. This forces a difficult question: did these civilizations possess a secret, a forgotten technique for organizing labor and resources that we have yet to fully comprehend? Or does the very existence of these projects suggest that our estimates of ancient populations, their health, and their agricultural productivity are fundamentally too low? The stones are silent, but the empty bowls are not. They whisper of a world far more abundant, far more organized, and far more capable than our textbooks often allow. A world that could summon not just the will to build, but the daily bread to make it possible. This leaves us at a crossroads of interpretation. The sheer scale of these projects forces a fundamental question: were the builders using knowledge we have since forgotten, or were they simply operating by a different set of rules? One popular narrative suggests a form of lost technology, perhaps a simple but brilliant machine or technique that made the impossible easy, a secret that vanished with the civilization itself. It is a compelling idea, offering a neat solution to the logistical puzzles. Yet, while ancient engineers were undoubtedly ingenious, the scholarly consensus points in a different, perhaps more profound direction. The real secret may not have been a forgotten tool, but a forgotten societal priority. For these cultures, the monumental project was not an extravagant side venture. It was the central engine of their identity. Mobilizing a vast labor force was not a burden, but a sacred duty and a unifying social ritual. The act of building together, of contributing to a legacy that would outlive everyone present, could have been more valuable than the time spent farming or trading. We might be judging their effort by our modern economic frameworks, where time is money and efficiency is God. They may have measured value in cosmic alignment, in communal cohesion, or in the favor of the gods. This perspective does not diminish their achievement, it recontextualizes it. It asks us to consider a society where dedicating 10,000 people for 20 years to build a single road was not a misallocation of resources, but the very point of having those resources in the first place. It also challenges us to reconsider ancient project management. We often imagine these works as chaotic, brute force endeavors, but the precision of a Nazca line or the sustained maintenance of the Qhapaq suggests a deep, accumulated wisdom of trial and error passed down through master builders. They may have possessed an intuitive, generational understanding of materials and physics that we, with our reliance on formulas and machinery, have simply lost touch with. The willingness to plan for a goal that would not be completed in one's own lifetime is perhaps the most alien concept to our modern mindset. We live in a world of quarterly reports and short-term gains. They lived in a world of eternity, where adding one stone to a pathway your great-grandfather began was a holy act, a stitch in the fabric of time itself. So, do these works defy easy explanation? Absolutely, but perhaps only because we are asking the wrong questions with our modern tools. We calculate calorie counts and man-hours, searching for an efficiency that was never the primary goal. The true scale we struggle to comprehend may not be of stone and earth, but of shared purpose. The greatest ancient wonder may not be the road carved into the cliff, but the unshakable collective will that decided the cliff was not the end of the journey, but merely the beginning. The collective weight of these stories leaves us with an overwhelming impression, a pattern etched across continents and millennia. It is a pattern of ambition that consistently, almost defiantly, pushed at the very boundaries of what a society could achieve with its hands, its time, and its collective will. The true, lingering mystery is rarely a single, magical piece of lost technology. More often, it is the intangible architecture of the human spirit that built them, the social organization capable of aligning thousands toward a goal none would see finished, the shared belief that could turn back-breaking labor into a sacred act, and the long-term vision that measured success not in years but in centuries. These roads and ramps are not just relics of engineering, they are the fossilized ambition of our ancestors. They tell a profound story about a drive that seems embedded in our species, the urge to reshape our world on a scale that echoes through time, to leave a mark so large it cannot be ignored by the future. This drive compels us to carve pathways through solid rock, to build mountains to conquer mountains, and to draw lines across deserts meant for the eyes of gods. It speaks to a need to connect, to declare, to ascend, and to endure. Each example we have walked together offers a different facet of this same incredible truth. So, as we leave these ancient pathways behind, which one lingers in your mind as the most baffling? Is it the silent stone rows of Carnac, the gleaming white Sacbeob in the dark jungle, or the ramp that may still hide within the Great Pyramid? The story is far from over. With every new pass of LiDAR over a dense canopy, every satellite image analyzed, and every shovelful of earth turned by careful hands, archaeologists continue to uncover the hidden networks of our past. The next great road, the next impossible ramp, is waiting to be found, ready to challenge our understanding once more and remind us that the ancient world was a place of giants, not in stature but in the scale of their dreams.